How are we doing? Good? Awesome, awesome. Welcome to 3D Foundations. You guys are here for 3D Foundations, right? Okay, just checking. I was in the wrong building before, but I was perfectly willing to teach them 3D Foundations also. All right, so good. We're all in the right place. That's a bonus. I know you guys have a ton of questions. You're really excited because this is actually the first class where you're actually going to what it is you want to do for a living, which is way more fun than some of that other stuff you've been doing. My apologies on that front, but you got to take the good with the bad. But we have a lot of material to talk about today, and in order to get through it all and guarantee it, what I like to do is sort of streamline my questions. So what I'll do is I will tell you a little bit about the class and hopefully answer a good majority of your questions, and then periodically I will stop to ask questions. And what I'd like for you to do, though, is keep your questions channeled to just the material we've talked about so far. Does that make sense? Because if we go too east and west, we'll never finish. So try to keep it streamlined, and then at the end, with all the time that we've earned, we can do all kinds of crazy perimeter questions. Does that make sense? Did it get a hell yeah?
Hell yeah.
Okay, there we go. That's a pretty good hell yeah for the first day. All right, so yeah, no, that's true. Well, but here's the thing. Sometimes you have to work early in the morning. And let me tell you, when you work in the entertainment field, you work early in the morning sometimes. And it's not a question of whether or not you're in the mood. So what you have to do is realize how many hours it takes for you to be at your A game at whatever o'clock they want you to be there, and make sure you get enough sleep. Does that make sense? So a little me to you advice. It's not about you anymore. Art for hire it's about what they want and when they want it. But we'll get to more of that stuff as we go. So we got, again, a lot of material to talk about. I'm hopefully going to hit on all the questions that you need to have answered. And then, again, we'll delve into the extra stuff that I did not happen to hit with my groovy slides. But one thing I would very strongly recommend right from go, this is definitely a note-taking class. I don't know if you've ever been in a note-taking class before. I know the first couple of classes here, that's not really a thing. It's a thing in here. This is we're playing for keeps now. You got to put on your big boy and big girl pants because we're trying to get ready for a career. So we've got 2 years to prepare you, hopefully, for a career that will last your lifetime. We have to cover a lot of information every day. This is an accelerated program, and what that means is we talk about 3 days worth of material in 1 day. So if A, you don't take notes, or B, you're kind of sleepy, or worst case scenario, you're not here, you've missed almost a week of information. Does that make sense? Don't miss class. That is take notes, don't miss class. Really the two biggest pieces of advice I gave you right from the beginning. There's nothing more detrimental to your understanding of this material than not being here to absorb it. So again, take notes. If you need me to say something again, I have no problem with repeating myself. If you need me to say something a different way, I have no problem with saying it a different way, trying to come up with a new and interesting way to explain it. I actually accept that as a bit of a challenge. So feel free to ask me about stuff while I'm talking about it. But periodically, I will look around to see that you guys are understanding. And if I'm reading it overall, yeah, we get that, I'm going to move on to the next thing. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So with those things in mind, let's move forward and start answering some of the questions you have. One of the big ticket items, you're probably wondering, who the heck are you working with? And we're going to talk more about it, but we have a lecture environment and we have a lab environment. When you're in here, you're going to be working with Brian Whitehurst back here behind the bright light. I can't see him. And me doing most of the talking, Steve Gold. I'm the course director for the class. Brian is the other course director for the class. When you get to the lab, which is that other environment we're going to talk about, you'll be working with 2 other super fun individuals. One of them is Marcus. So this is Marcus, and basically what happened is when we restructured the class, I asked everybody to make a Lego person of themselves. So this is what Marcus thinks he would look like if he was a Lego person. And again, you can see some of the things that he's interested in and some that he does, but I want to draw your attention to this thing, areas of specialty. That's one of the things we're trying to figure out while you're here at Full Sail, where it is you fit in on the CG production pipeline. How many of you guys have ever heard of the CG production pipeline? A couple of you, that's good, that's okay. And if you haven't, no big deal. I teach this class like you know absolutely nothing. Does that make sense? So I talk about everything I possibly can, but that means you're going to have to catch it when I throw it out there. And again, ask me questions if you don't understand it, but definitely active listening and learning is going to be the key. But in terms of areas of specialty, and what that means is when we're building something, whether we're making a movie or we're making a video game, we have what we call a production pipeline, and it works a lot like an assembly line. Now, you've probably heard of an assembly line, right? Let's say an automotive assembly line, building cars. At one end, we have an empty frame, and at the other end, we have a car we can drive, right? So point being, the car moves through this assembly line, and as it comes to a new station, it stops, and there's a person there who does one job. They do it really well, and they do it really fast. So like, for example, if I'm the guy who installs doors on the car, the frame comes to me, I put a door on. The next frame comes to me, I put another door on. I do one thing, I do it really well, and I do it really fast. Does that make sense? Specialty. CG production pipeline is much the same kind of thing. We've got storyboards and concept on one end, we've got a video game or a movie on the other end, and there's a whole bunch of stops where there are specialized people who do special jobs to make that thing go, and we all work together. Does that make sense? Okay, so if you look at Marcus's areas of specialty and interests, he likes modeling and texturing, lighting and rendering, which is towards the back end of the production pipeline and through the middle as well. We will go through quite a few of those actually within this class alone. But point being, you always want to ask people what their areas of specialty and their interests are, because you can learn more about it. And honestly, I think pretty much everybody who comes to this school, they know they want to be a part of this, making games or making movies, but they're not really 100% sure what it is they want to do. And sometimes they think they know what they want to do, and it changes while they're here, all of which are fine. We're just trying to help you find your way. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. So again, feel free to ask Marcus about any of those things that he's listed there, and or tease him about it. Also in the lab, you'll be working with Sarah. That's right, we have a girl too. So this is Sarah, and actually one of the areas of specialty for her is animation, which is really cool because some of you actually came here to try to get into some animation, and she's an excellent resource for that. So make sure you try to grab her ear on that front and ask her as many questions as you can about that, because she'll be more than happy to explain anything you'd like to know. Again, this is what Sarah thinks she looks like as a Lego person. And her interests are listed there. You probably would have guessed that's me. And in terms of the things that I'm interested in, I honestly really appreciate just about all of the CG production pipeline. I think every bit of it from beginning to end is pretty cool in different ways. I wouldn't necessarily want to do all of those jobs for a living, but I understand them and I can do them. And what I would say to you, just coming into the learning about the different disciplines in this field, try to learn as much as you can about all the disciplines, because they do interconnect, they're interdependent. What one person does absolutely affects somebody else, and the more you know about what other people do, the stronger you're going to be at what you do. And the more you know in general about the entire process, the more valuable you are as an employee. Does that make sense? So you want to be valuable. Knowledge is power, absolutely. So even if you're interested in animation, you still should learn as much as you can about modeling, because that only makes you a stronger player. So if we're looking at a field of players and we're trying to decide who we want on our team, I want somebody who can wear a lot of hats. Does that make sense? Particularly if I'm a smaller company, which is most likely going to be the one that gives you a shot right out of the box. So things to think about. Again, try to learn as much of this stuff as you can. Even if you're pretty sure this is not what you're interested in, you should still have a good handle on it, because it will affect your job in one way or another. Gesundheit. All right. So again, Brian is going to make me a Lego man too. I don't have one yet for him, but I'm anxious to see what he puts up there for his interests. Next big ticket item. Yeah, you can make yours flex if you want. Next big ticket item. What the heck are we doing this month? This month, we are primarily a polygon modeling class. We are going to be modeling what we call assets or objects from the real world around us. And the idea is when you're first learning how to draw, you start with still life, right? Because we want to master reality so that we can create very plausible fantasy, right? Fantasy is very heavily steeped in reality. That's what makes it believable. That's what makes it good. right? We've all seen movies and played video games where like the monster looks weak, right? Or the spaceship looks fake, or the weapons look ridiculous. And that's because it's not steeped heavily enough in reality, and it dispels the illusion. And games and movies are an illusion, and we have to maintain that feel, that look. Does that make sense? Okay, so much like 2D art, we are going to start by building the things we see every day. And again, our goal is to get as close to exact duplication as possible, much like that's the goal of still life. We have to own reality. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, so we're going to be building these objects, and then ultimately what we're going to be doing is we will be creating a still life at the very end of the class. We're going to create a little environment. Well, actually, we already made the environment for you, but what you're going to do is take the objects that you've made and you're going to place them within this environment, and you're going to be able to position the camera, and we're going to be able to render that out and make a final image, which you can, you know, post on a website, you can put it on Facebook, you can print it out and put it on your refrigerator, and you can show everybody what you did in the very first month here in computer animation school. Does that make sense? This is the goal. Pretty pictures. All right, in terms of the objects you're going to be building, we have them separated by their levels of complexity. Level 1 assets are objects that are on the easier side to build. Those are your minion level objects. We have level 2 folder, which has the level 2 assets in it, and these are our boss level folder. And again, the objects are a little bit more complex and therefore will take longer for you to build. When we get to level 3, we are in the supreme poly commander level of objects. These are the most challenging objects for you to build, but you will learn the most from trying to build something that's just a little bit outside of your range. You'll find it's a lot like many things that we do in life. If we sort of take the easy route, we don't really grow as much or as fast. We learn more from challenge and struggle than anything else. Does that make sense? Okay. So, and the good news is if you follow our progression and you move through the stuff that you're building, when you guys get to week 3, you have the opportunity to build your own Lego person, just like the ones that we did. And what Lego person is complete without accessories? Yes, very cool. In fact, it was a couple months ago, one of the students, as soon as all their friends found out that they were building a Lego person at the end of the class, everybody wanted one. So like he had to build one for his whole family. So it was pretty cool. All right, any questions about the models that we're going to be building? Anything at all about what we're building and why? We do not have to texture. We are going to be talking about the process of creating an AO or ambient occlusion pass for our geometry because it makes it look really cool, which is sort of our first step into the texturing process, but we won't go into great detail just because we don't have enough time. Sadly, we've only got 1 month. I wish it was longer, but I do not have control over that. But what I would say is if we did have more time, I would definitely try to incorporate texturing because UV mapping is a critical portion of the modeler's job, which is what we're learning this month, what it is to be a modeler. And UV mapping is kind of an abstract thought process, but once you start applying textures to it, then it really starts to make sense for you. So, and that's why we're doing the AO pass, so we can see how that all works. Yes?
Just wanted you to touch on the previous slide.
Absolutely.
Boop. Before that. So you're going to have all 3 levels of assets on different assignments, and we can choose which we feel most comfortable with.
Absolutely, absolutely. There'll be a collection of objects that you can build week 1. There's a collection of objects you can choose from to build from week 2, and a collection of objects that you can choose from week 3. We might say something like build 3 objects from your level 1 folder. We might say something like build 2 level 2s and 2 level 3s. You know, it's going to mix each week in terms of the turn-in, but there are multiple objects for you to choose from, and you just pick the ones you really are most interested in. Yep, and they vary in complexity even within the folders. So there's sort of easier level 1 models, and then there's harder level 1 models. So even within that folder, there's harder and easier. So you can choose what you're most comfortable with. It's a good question. Yeah, no, it's a good question. Anything else before we move on? Yeah, go ahead. Well, here's what I would say. I will never stop you from modeling above and beyond what we ask for. Always do exactly what we ask for because that's critically important. And that goes for even when you're in the field trying to get a job or keep a job. Always do exactly what's asked for because you will never get in trouble for that. But feel free to build additional stuff if you wish. Show it to us. You know, we'll always give you feedback and critiques on the work that you give us. And, you know, you will grow more from the extra stuff you build because you're just putting more time into it and you're more interested in it, frankly. So again, I will never stop from building more than we ask for, but make sure you hit exactly what we're asking for first. And then with the time you've earned, then do that other stuff. But it doesn't get you bonus points if that's okay. Just to let you know, I keep everybody on an even playing field. So it doesn't matter if you're the greatest modeler that ever lived, or this is the first time you've ever touched a 3D application in your life. Everybody's on the same playing field, and I do that on purpose. Yep.
Like I'm assuming all those assets are like just pictures of things we have to model.
That's correct.
Would we be able to like take our own pictures and have them go through you like, hey, I want to model this instead of anything that's in the folder?
No, unfortunately, you must model the assets that are in the folder because that way we have a much tighter rein on what it is you're actually building. In addition to which, if you are in my local class, and my apologies to my digital friends, but if you're in the local class, you can actually hold the objects because we bring in a wagon, bins on it that has these objects on it. So you can literally hold them, look at them, take them apart, see how they work, which is a tremendous advantage when it comes to trying to model. And so, for example, if you choose, no, you know what I really want to make is an X-Wing, I'm pretty sure George Lucas is not going to let me borrow one. So odds are not there on that one. So, and again, from that idea of I don't let anybody go outside of the same field, I want everybody building the same stuff because what happens is you can look at what you built and you can look at the exact same object as built by someone else, and what you see is skill, ability. Does that make sense? So it's not like, oh, well, I can't make an X-Wing. Well, no, we're all building a magnifying glass, but you can tell the skill level from two different people when they make the same object. Does that make sense? So it's much more comparable. Again, I don't want anybody to feel like, oh, because I can't build that, I'm not going to do well. We are all building the same stuff. It's a good question.
So we had in town last month. We had a guest speaker that said, don't just do what's in the folder, pick your own thing, go, you know, go above and beyond. And then you're saying you have to do what's in the folder.
Must do what's in the folder.
Right. And we had someone also say, well, you know, I would rather have a C student that does something different than a 4.0 student that does exactly what's required by the rubric. So we're just getting told a bunch of things that are different right now.
It depends on what it is you're learning. We're talking about 3D, which is not only art, but math. So what we're trying to do is build foundational skills that yield good quality geometry. Because what most people don't realize is when it comes to art, does it look beautiful? That's the given.
Right.
Does that make sense? Wow, that's the best X-Wing I ever saw. Well, it has to be. Does that make sense? If you don't build the best X-Wing I've ever seen, you don't even have a chance. Does that make sense? So that being the given, what we have to concentrate on are the technical concepts behind building that. Building good quality, lightweight, efficient geometry that will work throughout the production pipeline without causing mathematical issues. Because although we are creating art, we're using math to do it, which is a huge difference from pen and pencil. Does that make sense? Because you just draw. I mean, I love 2D art. It is way less complicated. They use a lot of the same concepts because they are built off of the same ideas, which is what you'll appreciate about the two, but distinctly different in how you go about it. Does that make sense?
The advice I was going to give for everyone is just follow the rubric, do what's asked of you, and if you want to do extra on the side of your portfolio, then do it.
Absolutely. And again, a great mindset for you to have is when you're doing art for hire, you don't do what you want to do. It's not even ever that. You don't come to the office and hey, boss, I want to build a dragon today. Awesome. Here's your check. Enjoy. Yeah, no, they're like, look, you're going to build this. It's going to be this many triangles. It's going to have this many maps on it, 256 by 256. I need that thing by 3:30 this afternoon. Go. And it doesn't matter whether it's, you know, an armored tank or Barbie doll. That thing's got to get done under those technical specifications under that timeline. That's art for hire. Does that make sense? So this is the part that we're really trying to concentrate on, grooming you guys to be prepared for that kind of field. The stuff you do for yourself, take all the time you want. Build it any way you wish. Make it Make yourself happy. That's what that art is for. Art for hire, very seldom is it the stuff that makes you happy. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it really is, and that's a gift. So be grateful when that comes along. But it's a whole other animal when you're doing art for somebody else. It's a fair question, but it's because it's two totally different approaches, two different uses. Does that make sense? Okay. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, everything is going to be built in Maya. Yep. Good question. Anything else? No. Awesome questions. I love to see it. Please ask by all means. All right, let's take a look at asset grading. And this actually speaks to some of the questions we were having before. Artistic criteria, you can see, is 34% of your grade. Artistic criteria. What that means is, does it look right? Does that make sense? We have artistic terms and concepts which we apply to, does it look right? And that's your artistic criteria. Does that make sense? So the fact that the object looks exactly like the thing I'm supposed to be building, what does that get you for a total score? 34%. Can you pass with a 34? No. And what that means, boys and girls, and my digital friends too, is that if you build the most awesome screwdriver I've ever seen in my life, it's beautiful. When I open the file, a golden shaft of sunlight shines through the clouds onto my laptop. The angels sing and I weep. That's still only a 34. Does that make sense? Not going to pass. So don't be confused by this whole, it looks beautiful. That's the given. Does that make sense? So there are other elements here, and what we're talking about is the technical and organizational criteria for every turn-in. Because again, we're trying to get you guys prepped for working in a production pipeline. I'm going to take something from someone else, I'm going to work on it, and I'm going to give it to somebody else. And if I do my job poorly, everybody's going to pay for it on down the line. And believe me, the last thing in the world you want is your name associated with doing a bad job. Does that make sense? You will be unemployed quickly and have a difficult time finding work. Does that make sense? So these things are just as important at this level to learn these strategic, mathematical, foundational skills. They're going to help you to do a better job at being a part of a larger creative team. Does that make sense? Okay, so we're grading on all of this stuff. As you move through the program and through the classes, the technical side becomes less as critical an issue because we're getting more into the art and the different means of doing things. But at this stage, we are very heavily into those technical aspects. All right, any questions on those ideas? I want to make sure we touched on all of that. No? Okay, good. All right, so let's talk about the class structure. As I was saying before, we have two environments that we learn in. We have a lecture environment and we have a lab environment. This is the lecture environment in here with Brian and myself. And in the lecture environment, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be introducing some concepts of 3D. We're going to be teaching you some tools. We're going to teach you some strategies on how to go about building things, breaking them down and figure out the best way to build them. And all of these things are going to be, of course, the things that you're going to be building. So you're going to need to pay very close attention and take good notes, because within the lecture, we have what we call lecture activities, which you can download from FSO. And they are basically a series of very short little activities that we do in lecture together so that we can understand if you know what it is we talked about. So to kind of give you an idea of how it will work, I will explain something to you. This is how a combustion engine works. Then we will sit down and do an activity together. Here's a combustion engine. Show me how it works. So if you listened to me, if you paid attention and you wrote down the things that I said, you can make it work and you can demonstrate it function. Does that make sense? If I say, okay, it's time for an activity, and you say, so what do I do now first? Your approach to learning is not working. Does that make sense? Now I know hands-on is the way to learn, and that's why I've got these activities in here. But you still have to take notes and pay attention and actively learn so that you can execute. Does that make sense? There's no such thing as learn on the job where they don't tell you anything and just stick you in and, okay, go for it. You know, that this doesn't happen. We don't have that kind of time or money in any field where they can afford that expense. Does that make sense? The learning curve is a painful one. So what they want you to do is be able to go in. They just want to take people who are capable and plug them in so that the machine keeps going. Does that make sense? Okay, so point being, got to write down stuff, got to understand, so ask questions if you don't, because as soon as we go to an activity, if you ask me, I have no idea where to start this, I know that you weren't paying attention. You weren't writing things down, and you're certainly not asking questions. Does that make sense? Okay, so for those of you who like hands-on stuff, that's exactly what this is for, hands-on. But you're still gonna have to take notes first, because there's way too much stuff to remember. And that's not a challenge. I'm not saying, hey, you can't do it, I betcha. I'm telling you, I have taught this class for 11 years now. I have a really good idea of what works and what doesn't in terms of study approaches. And believe me when I tell you, you've got to write stuff down or you will fall behind very, very quickly. And coming back from that is very, very difficult. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm not challenging you. I have just seen other approaches and they typically don't go well. In fact, just last month, I had a student in my class who took this class once previously and failed badly. And then midway through last month, they came up to see me and they said, wow, you know what? Taking notes makes this so much easier. I said, yes. What do I tell every class I have on day one? Take notes, please. The reason being, there's way too much stuff to remember, and there's a lot. Like just after today, you're going to be like, whoa, this guy talks a lot. So point being, there is a lot to learn, a lot. You will not be able to remember it all. It's way too much. And honestly, you wouldn't want to. You want your notebook to go back to so that you can have that information. I like to describe the process is if you're just listening, you're renting the information. If you write it down, you own the information. Does that make sense? You want to own the information. Don't borrow it from me. Own it. So when you've got that stuff, you can go back to it. And where this comes into play tremendously is as the month goes on and you're starting to get really tired, you're not getting enough sleep, it's a lot harder for your brain to function at optimal efficiency. You're going to start forgetting stuff. You're going to start having trouble focusing and concentrating. Nothing will keep you awake like writing stuff down. Does that make sense? So believe me, on a number of different levels, it's going to make a huge difference for you. And again, I'm not trying to trick you and I'm not trying to challenge you. I'm just telling you the way it is so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel and step on all these landmines that other people have already done. Does that make sense? Because I want you guys all to be successful. I would be super happy if every one of you just like gangbusters came out of this class. So that's always my goal. Make it easy for you, do the best I can to make it attainable, and then make sure that you guys are in a position to be successful. But it's going to take active engagement. Make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. All right, so we've got these in-class activities that we do together. And that makes sure that you and I both know you know what we talked about just a second ago. And then we go on to more lecture material, and then we do another activity, and then more lecture material, and then another activity. Now, at the end of the lectures, we have like this all-encompassing project that we work on, and it's called a skill check. And basically, the purpose of the skill check is to verify the fact that you understood everything we talked about on any given day. So there are 10 skill checks, and one for each class, except for the last one. And these skill checks are basically a mini assignment. They don't take too long, but it's based on what it is we did that day. So if you can do the skill check, you understand what you need to from that day to move forward. Does that make sense? It's just, again, verification. Do you know what the heck we're talking about? Because you've got to do this one on your own versus the activities which we do together. Does that make sense? Okay, now, in terms of these skill checks, super bonus, again, not only does this verify that you understand what the heck it is we're talking about, you can turn these in, and they are worth 1% for each one you do. So if you do all 10 skill checks, that is an added 10% to your grade. That means if you got a C in this class and you did all the skill checks, you just got a B. Does that make sense? A full letter grade increase by doing the skill checks. Please do the skill checks. Not only will it help you, but it will increase your grade.
So it's like extra credit.
It's not extra credit, but it is 10% of your grade. But it's easy points to get. Does that make sense? I can give you a big long math equation worth 1%, or I can give you 1 + 1 and that's worth 1%. Does that make sense? So this is way easier. So again, there's enough stuff to do. It's pretty challenging. This is a cakewalk. So this is worth doing. A full letter grade increase. Believe me, you want that. So doing the skill checks is a great idea. Also, in terms of the skill checks, again, we have 3 skill checks a week, and those 3 skill checks add up to what it is you're going to have to do with your weekly turn-in. Because each week we've got a turn-in, and that's where we're building the assets, the various elements that are in those folders. So if you can do skill check 1, 2, and 3, you're going to do terrific on your week 1 turn-in. If you can do skill check 4, 5, and 6, you're going to do great on your week 2 turn-in. Does that make sense? Activities lead to skill checks lead to turn-ins. They're literally rungs on a ladder. You skip a rung, you could fall. Does that make sense? So they build. That's what they're there for. Please use them. It's kind of like connect the dots. Any questions about lecture before we talk about lab? No? How about my digital friends? How are they doing? No questions. All right. Yes, go ahead. Yep, absolutely. Right here, what's going on? This is the lecture environment. We will have more lecture material today, and we will even have activities today. So you'll already get to see kind of how that all works. Now, if you don't have Maya installed and running as of today, that's okay, because we can help you set that up in lab. But this is the one and only day you can come to this classroom without having Maya installed and functional, and without having everything downloaded from FSO that you need. Does that make sense? This is the only day that'll work. You've got to have all your stuff that you need. And if you go to FSO, you'll see there's a section called downloads. Download all that stuff and know where it is on your computer, because we're going to have access to it on a daily basis. Does that make sense? So that's a terrific question. But like I said, if you don't have Maya today, this is the only day. It's not a big deal, but I would write more than usual then, because you're going to be describing more stuff and less able to do things. But by the time you get to lab, we will work out getting you set up where you've downloaded and installed it properly. Does that make sense? Is that what you were asking me? Awesome. I just wanted to make sure I hit it. And if I miss your question completely, feel free to tell me. You can say, yeah, that's cool. That wasn't at all what I asked. I'm totally fine with that too. All right. All right, let's talk a little bit about the lab. The lab environment is the other place you have class. Now, you might notice that it doesn't tell you what lab you're in or, whatever. And when you're on FSO, you have to actually tell it you're in section 1, and then it will populate with where and when you have lab. Does that make sense? It doesn't do that by default. Why? I don't know. I didn't write FSO. But point being, you do have lab. Every day you have lecture, you will have lab. And the lab environment, that's where you'll see Marcus and Sarah, they're basically, whereas Brian and I kind of have to run around and do activities sort of quickly, and we have a lot of information to get through. The lab is where you have a lot of time to get help. You can have somebody sit down with you and literally, hey, can you sit right here and tell me what I'm doing wrong, because this is not working. So this is your chance to get in-depth one-on-one help. Now, if you're in my digital class, we also have something called the Google Hangout, where you can sign on, and it's an online environment to get help. And by the way, it's not just for my digital friends. You guys can access it too. And the Google Hangout is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. A lot of times there's instructors in there, but there's almost always fellow students in there. So if you've got questions and you need some help, that's where you go. 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, whenever you choose to work, go there if you need help, because I'm hopefully sleeping. But the point is, you've got to get a hold of help if you need it. The worst thing you can say is, well, I'll get it later. Does that make sense? That's putting a lot of faith in later. Get help now. In fact, if you need a tutor, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but the school will give you tutors for free. Did you guys know that? You can contact Student Success Services and say, hey, I need a tutor. I'm having a real hard time in this class, and they will assign someone to you. It'll be like a date, right? Don't treat it like a date. That's probably not a good idea. But point being, if you need the help, it's there, but you have to actively pursue it. I can't drag you to the Google Hangout. I wish I could. I can't drag you to Student Success Services to ask for a tutor. I wish I could. In fact, if I could make you guys work together, I would. Be like, everybody meets at your house. We're going to order pizzas and we're going to work on week 1 assignment together. Let's go. Because that's really one of the best ways to do it, work as a team. But again, I can't do that either. I can very strongly suggest it, do it, but I can't actually make you do it. Make sense?
Hell yeah.
There we go. Thank you for playing. All right. So when you get to the lab, you're going to see Marcus and Sarah. They'll be in there with you. And again, that's more one-on-one direct help. And they actually help out in the Google Hangout as well. So you'll get to hear it and talk to them digitally as well, if you wish. But if you're in my local class, you can actually see them in the flesh. Now, in terms of what we're going to be doing each week, remember I promised you we had a weekly turn-in. In the weekly turn-in, we give you this Maya file, and it's got these really cool columns in it. We built the columns, it's all good. And what you're going to do is place the objects that you built on top of the columns. You're like showing them off. And you know, it's a somewhat complicated process, but of course we have instructional videos to help you see what it is you need to do and how it's going to work. So just again, to give you an idea, we give you that file, you build those objects, and then you just bring them in there and stick them on the columns. Does that make sense? That's your weekly turn-in, what it will look like. All right, week 1 at least. Any questions about this idea? What are we doing for each week's turn-in? Okay. Yes? Nope, those pedestals are built by us. All you have to do is put the things on top. I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. No, they don't have to be a specific file type to make them all work. We're going to talk all about file types and how to do these processes. And it's not as complicated as you would imagine it is. But what you do have to realize is after you finish building this object, there's another step. Does that make sense? So just remember, for your weekly turn-in, you got to bring everything into here too. Let me give you an idea. Let's say I'm modeling this room. I'm doing a movie about students in a classroom and I have to model this room. I'm not going to build this room and then build everything in it. We build objects in separate files. So there'll be a file for a model of you. There'll be a file for your laptop. There'll be a file for that light. There'll be a file for that projector. Does that make sense? Those will be all separate Maya files. I will also have somebody build the room. And then we're going to import all of the objects that we've built, the desks, the chairs, all the people. Does that make sense? And then we populate it. That's what we're doing. All right. So again, this is going to be our goal for week 1 and more about that as we go. But just so you have a bird's eye view going in, you know what our goal is. It's easier to see the path to get there. All right. Now, in terms of lecture 1, this is what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about folder creation. And incidentally, very, very rarely will I teach you something that you don't need to know. In fact, I can't remember the last time I did that. So if I'm showing you how to create a folder, do you think that's something you're going to have to do? Yes, and you can bet on it. Now, here's the kicker though. You're not going to be making your own folders for week 1. You're not going to be making your own folders for week 2. You're going to be making your own folders in week 3. Does that make sense? So this is going to be 3 weeks from now. 3 weeks of very intense work in 2 very demanding classes. You're not going to remember this if you don't write it down. Does that make sense? And that's why I say jot it down. It's your best buddy. It's not that bad. So we're going to talk about folder creation. We are going to discuss the Maya interface. We're going to talk about the major landmarks within Maya, what they are and what they do so that you can become more familiar. We will go in depth as we utilize each of these things, but it's important you know where things are. The interface can be pretty intimidating. We're going to talk about the importance of reference, and then we're going to delve into the polygon primitives, which are the objects that we actually build things out of. Much like when you're drawing, we start with simple shapes, volumes to represent the objects we're trying to create. Modeling is the same thing. In fact, there's a lot of parallels between illustration and modeling. Oh, how many of you guys draw, by the way? Yay! Wow, this is like the only all drawing class I've ever had. That's pretty cool. All right, well, good for you guys. Listen, don't ever stop drawing. Draw, 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 draw with your every waking moment, because that is awesome. Not only is it great for your mind, body, and soul, but it is tremendous in developing your artistic skills. So keep that going. Don't ever let that go. Don't draw in here though. In here, write notes. Or draw the notes. If you can draw your notes, that's fine too. But it should pertain to what we're talking about. But anyway, so again, we're going to talk about these polygon primitives and how we build stuff out of them. All right. So organization is a huge deal because it basically keeps us all on the same page. It makes things continue to move. The film industry, the video game industry, all of these industries, time literally is money. You can find out a quantifiable value for every hour of work that's being done. So what that means is if files are lost, if files are misnamed, if things are not organized properly, and you can't find them, it's the same as just deciding not to work. Does that make sense? So it is of the utmost importance. We name things, we structure things well, we position them where they need to be, place them in where they're supposed to be, put them in the file types that are expected for them to be in, and all of these things help the machine going forward. And that's what we want to do. We want to keep the process moving smoothly, or as smoothly as possible, all things considered. So again, organization, file management become really, really important, because otherwise you have utter chaos. And in fact, I think I did a Google search for the word chaos and this picture came up. So we're going to talk about creating and setting projects, which are critical for the beginning of this process, and then we're going to get into the importance of and use of naming within Maya. Boop. And as I said, in terms of the modeling, it makes everything move more smoothly. And again, when you're working in a team, a large group of people, how many of you guys have ever played telephone? You guys ever play telephone where one person says a word and they kind of pass it around? You know, it starts out cheeseburger, and by the time you get the whole way through it, Alcatraz is what the last person says. You know, so you can see how things get confusing quickly, even when you're right next to each other. So imagine, you know, hundreds of people working on a single project, and they're not even in the same building sometimes, right? They might not even be in the same country. So point being, if you're not organized, it can get away from you in a hurry. So we got to make sure that we're pretty focused and organized, because otherwise everything starts breaking down, and you definitely don't want to be a part of the breaking down. You want to be a part of the making it go. All right. So let's do a little activity. This is our activity slide. So whenever you see Sarah working out with dumbbells, me running, and Marcus doing push-ups, and you got that little orange banner up there, you know, oh, we're going to do an activity now. So typically what that will mean is you'll have to open up a file on your activity file folder, which you will download from FSO. But the good news is you don't need to do that for this activity and today, but just realize that that's what that's going to signal. So, and we'll talk more about that as we go. But for this activity, we're just going to be creating a file folder in Maya, and then we are going to delve into some naming ideas while we're in there. All right. Now, let me make sure I got a good size Maya in there so everybody can see. Are my digital friends able to see okay, Brian? Okay, just want to make sure it all fits. I know the screen looks a little bit different over there. All right, cool. All right, so in terms of our copy of Maya, again, we're going to be working with 2018 this month. I've dabbled with 2018. I haven't really messed with it a whole bunch yet. So it should be an adventure for all of us as we go through it. The good news is Maya hasn't changed that much since Maya version 4.5, I think, was the first one I learned on. So again, there's some cool stuff that they put on it, but Maya is pretty much Maya as it has been for a while. So it should be pretty much the same, but they might have changed the names of things and moved things around a little bit, but I'm sure we can find them. But anyway, in terms of creating a project, what I want you to understand is that when we are working, it is, as I was saying, it's very important to be organized. Now, in our world, we organize things with filing cabinets, right? We can get a filing cabinet, and we've got different drawers, right? And we can put different things in the different drawers, and it helps us organize, right? We can have file folders inside. Okay, working with Maya is kind of the same idea, because when we work in Maya, it's not just us, the artist, we're also working with an application, which is doing intense amounts of math. So what happens is we need to be on the same page. What is it we're working on? What materials do I need to do this project? What materials do you, Maya, need to work on this project? So what we do is we create a project folder system. And the project folder system is kind of like a filing cabinet with drawers and file folders in the various drawers. Some of the files you need to do your job as the modeler or art animator, whatever it is you're doing. Some of these files Maya needs in order for Maya to do Maya's job, which is a lot of math. Does that make sense? So it's really important that we create these folder systems for whatever it is we're building, whatever project we decide to undertake. And then the next step is we have to explain to Maya which project we're working on. That's where we get into the setting the project idea. Does that make sense a little bit? Okay, let's take a look at folder structure. How do I create it? And how do I set it up? All right, so let's say I decide, you know what, I want to build this really cool robot. I'm so excited, I can't wait to make it. So the first thing I need to do is create a file folder system for this new project that I want to work on. So what I'll do is I will come to my main interface and I will go to the main menu item, File. So if I click that with the left mouse button, I get a drop-down menu. And that just means instructions or options to choose from that drop down. And I'm going to go all the way down here to Project Window. And this is where I tell Maya basically, hey, I want to build this new thing. And I need a folder structure system for it, and can you make that for me? So if I go to Project Window and I click on the word with my left mouse button, it creates this window here called the Project Window. And right up at the top in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a button marked New. So I want to do this new project, this cool robot that I want to build. So I click on the word New. And now I have the ability to name it. So I'm going to highlight it here. And I'm going to call it Cool Robot. And what you'll notice when I was naming this is that I capitalized the R in robot, because cool and robot are two different words. So I'm trying to indicate this is a separate thing. The reason being, computers, particularly Maya, they don't like spaces, because a space is a non-character that's not calculable. Does that make sense? So what we will do is we will make the first letter of the second word capitalized, or we can come back and we can do an underscore if we want to, and that will also work. So we can do either one, it doesn't make a difference. But we want to make sure that Maya understands what we're talking about and we don't have just spaces in things. Does that make sense? Okay, there was a question, did I get it? Good. So here we go. If you look here, this next area, it says location. And what that's asking you is, where would you like me to create this folder system? Because you can put it basically anywhere you wish. I'm going to tell it to put it on my desktop because it's just easier for me to show you where it is when I do that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this yellow folder. And what I want you guys to learn and remember is anytime you see a yellow folder in Maya, what you're doing is you're directing Maya to where something is. It's a path, a trail that tells you where things are. Does that make sense? Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to the end of the location section, and I'm going to click on this yellow folder. And Maya says, okay, where do you want this thing to go? You tell me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look over here, and you see where it says desktop? I'm just going to select desktop and hit select. So now you'll see that the path for the creation of this is now desktop. Does that make sense? It's telling you where it's going to go. Desktop. All right. Now, each of these folders here is going to be created, and each one is going to have these names on it. And these are the default names for folders in Maya. Again, some of which you need, some of which Maya might be looking for. So again, there's a lot of folders. They each have jobs. I need all of them. So what I'm going to do is leave these at their defaults and then just hit accept. All right. Now, if I minimize Maya and I go to my desktop, you will see I have a folder on my desktop called Cool Robot. This is my Cool Robot project. And when I double click on it, it opens up and I see all of those cool folders that I saw before. Again, each of those folders has a different job. Some of them are for me, some of them are for Maya. but you'll also notice that there's a little workspace icon in there, and that's what basically launches the interface. Does that make sense? And the folder that is of the most importance to me is the scenes folder, because that's where all my Maya files will be kept. When I start saving, they're gonna go there. Does that make sense? Scenes folder. That's where my Maya scenes are gonna be if I set my project properly. And this is the next big ticket item that is very simple, but easy to make a mistake and problematic if you don't get it right. So now I have to tell Maya, okay, I've created this project, Cool Robot, but I'm not ever working on just one thing. You know, I've always got a couple of things in the air that I'm working on, right? My supervisor is completely unreasonable. So what I need to do is make sure I'm telling Maya when I change gears to another project, what I'm actually working on. And I do that by what we call setting the project. And I can't tell you how much more smoothly things go when you set your project. Couldn't be more simple though, the process. I got Maya open, right? I go to File, and then right under Project Window, you will see Set Project. All right, so I choose Set Project. And Maya says, okay, what is it you want to work on? Well, on my desktop, I have a file called Cool Robot, and that's the one I want to work on. So now I hit Set in the lower right-hand corner. And what that does is it tells Maya that's actually what I want to work on. So when I start trying to open files, it takes me right to Cool Robot. When I start saving files, it takes me right to Cool Robot. When Maya needs information like reference images to bring in order for me to be able to model this stuff as my reference, it goes right to the source images folder within Cool Robot. Does that make sense? Maya and I are on the same page now. Things are going to, if I don't set my project, Maya's not going to be able to find stuff, and it's going to start saving things all over the place. And if you can't find it, you can't turn it in. And guess what grade you get for stuff you can't turn in? 0. Hell yeah. Does that make sense? So muy mal on the scale of good to bad. So setting the project, super easy. Every time you launch Maya, get in the habit. Set your project. Set it to whatever it is you're working on. You'll be so much happier that way. All right. Yes, go ahead. Setting the project or saving the project?
Okay, you lock on the drop down when I want to choose the project I'm working on.
Oh, okay, it's super easy. All you have to do is go to File, left mouse button, click, and choose Set Project. And this is how you tell Maya, hey, this is what I want to work on right now. Because I might have Cool Robot, I might have, you know, Cyborg Dog, and Maserati as 3 projects I'm working on right now. And I got to tell Maya which one I want to work on right now. Does that make sense? Okay, so I just say Set Project, and it says, well, what do you want to work on? And you navigate to wherever it is. We try to save stuff in our Documents folder. It's an awesome habit to get into because everything's all in one place and you can just go get it. So what I recommend is make a folder in there for this class and just put everything in there because it's way easier to find everything. All right, but in this instance, the folder I'm looking for is on my desktop, and I choose my Cool Robot folder, and I just have to click the folder Cool Robot one time. I don't have to go into it. I don't have to go inside. I don't have to pick any of the interior folders. All I have to do is click Cool Robot and hit Set. And now Maya knows what I want to work on. Make sense? All right. Let's get back to the slides. And next we're going to talk about the Maya interface. Now, in terms of the Maya interface, there's a lot going on in there, and it's very intimidating when you first look at it. It's crazy scary, and the fact that it's all gray and it makes it look like the evil empire made it does not make it any easier. It used to be kind of cheerful and colorful. Remember that, Brian?
Yeah.
Maya, was it 9 was the last one with color? I can't remember which one was the last one, but there was a version of Maya that actually had colors like blue and gray and yellow and orange, and it was cute. Now it's just angry. But I guess, well, I don't know. I'm sure there's some scientific reason that somehow everything being a middle gray is less harmful on your rods and cones of your eye. I don't know. But to me, it just looks like a surly artist. sitting there, you know, with his cigarettes and coffee. What do you want? Exactly. All right, so let's talk about the Maya interface and what's going on there. And what I'd like you to do is kind of familiarize yourself with the different parts of Maya and what they're called, just so that you can start building up this language. Because Maya is kind of its own language. So, you know, we're trying to learn the words for things, not only just so that we can talk and I can help you and you sound like a professional when you're discussing what you're doing, but if you have a question for me, and especially if it's in an email, you know, if you, hey, where does the thingy go with the doodad, with the thingamajigger? You know, the what's its window? I have no idea what you're talking about. So I'm not going to be able to help you. But if you know the terms, we can communicate. Does that make sense? So trying to figure out what all these things are called and a little bit about what they do. So let's get into that. All right. Now, some of these things we've already messed with. Right across the top here, these are called our main menu items. And basically, these main menu items are things we can click on, and they lead to various drop downs. And these main menu items are basically tools and actions. An example of a tool would be like a screwdriver or a hammer, right? An example of an action would be like cut these things in half, glue these things together, make a hole in that. These would be actions. And all of these things are housed within these main menu items. So, for example, if you were looking for a specific tool, like I could go to Edit Mesh and click the drop down and see, oh, the extrude tool. That's a tool we will go to a lot in this class once we get into modeling. So I would be able to get to that tool. And many of these tools have a little box next to them there, and that's the options box. And basically what happens when you click on that is it opens up the tools options that kind of change the way it works. For example, hammers drive nails in as well as pull them out. It depends on how you're holding it as to what it does. Does that make sense? So this is how you would go in and actually kind of change the way it would function, the end result you would get. So you can mess with these options. In terms of the options and playing with them, there's usually an edit where you can reset a tool. If you feel like, shoot, this tool's not doing what it did before, well, maybe you changed one of the options, you can reset it. So that's very helpful with a tool that's not doing what you expect. And many of these tools have a help section for them, which is terrific because if you have an internet question or an internet connection, you can launch Maya's help documents, which are an amazing resource to help you understand how something works. And it's basically pictures and text that talk about the different elements of the tools and how they work and how you can play with them to get different end results. So as long as you've got an internet connection, this is another great resource for help. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, lots of fun stuff in there to help you further understand something, maybe delve into some tools you haven't touched on before. And again, there's always options on other things that are similar that you can jump around and learn more about that as well. So again, 2, 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm not available, this is a good resource. So make sure you utilize that. All right. Now, next thing we're going to talk about is the status line. The status line is the way we explain to Maya what kind of job we're trying to do. Now, Maya is a pretty cool application. It does a ton of really interesting things, but I have to tell it specifically what thing I want to do. Because the truth of the matter is, let's say, for example, Maya was an application that built houses, right? I just go, hey, Maya, I want to build a house, and I only need Maya to do it. You use different tools for the different jobs within house building. For example, when you're interior painting, you need paintbrushes, drop cloths, drip pans, ladders, that kind of stuff. When you're doing shingling, right, you need hammers, you need shingles, you need tar, right? There's different tools you're using for shingling. So the idea is, if every tool I needed to build a house was laid out at one time, there would be no space for me to work. I'd be just surrounded by tools. So what we do is we organize Maya by the kind of job we're doing, and then we get the tools we need. Does that make sense? So if I'm doing interior painting, I only see tools associated with interior painting. So the status line is a way of having Maya understand what kind of job you're trying to do. We are a polygon modeling class, so you want to make sure it's set for modeling. Because what happens is when that status line is set to something else, your main menu items are different. If you're animating, you get animation main menu items. So you want to make sure it's set for the kind of job you're trying to do. And in this case, we're mostly modelers, so that's what it should be set for. And incidentally, just so you can see, again, from this drop down, I can choose animation, and you can see that my menu items are different. So make sure you are set for modeling so that you can get to your modeling items. All right. Now, this area down here, we have shelves and shelf tabs. And what you'll notice is that these shelf tabs, you click on them, and it opens up a whole bunch of cool little pictures. And these pictures are basically buttons. So for example, we are a polygon modeling class, so we're going to be mostly on the polygon modeling tab. And you'll see there's a little icon here. And if you hover your cursor over it, it will tell you it's the extrude tool. Wait a minute. When I went over here to edit mesh, I saw the extrude tool. And there's the picture of the icon. Now what that means is if I want to use the extrude tool, I can just click this as opposed to going to edit mesh, extrude, which is a little bit longer. Does that make sense? These quick buttons will speed up your work process. Now, why don't they have labels? Well, the names would be too small, but the good news is when you hover your cursor over something in Maya, it'll tell you what it is. So it doesn't necessarily have to have a name written right on it. If I put my cursor over the tool, it'll tell you it's the extrude tool, and it'll tell you a little bit about it. But also anything you put your cursor over, down here in the lower left-hand corner, this is called the help line. And this will tell you what things are called and a little bit about what they do. And in which case, if you know what something is called, you can look it up using Maya's help documents. Does that make sense? So you can run stuff down, even things you've never heard of before, and try to figure out how it works. So that is a possibility. And the help documents are pretty good. So again, these buttons can help you out in terms of shortcuts to some of the stuff you want to do. All right. Now, let's talk about this area here. This is called the workspace. It's called the panel view. It's called a panel. There's a lot of different words for it, but it's basically, this is the canvas we're working on. This is the art we're trying to create. And you'll notice that it has its own little menu items up at the top. View, shading, lighting, show. And these little menu items hold all kinds of cool things to show and hide things as we need to, and put lights in and that kind of thing. So there's different things that we learn from up there. And they have their buttons too, which are shortcuts to those menu items. Now, this particular window is called the perspective window. And you see it says persp there. That's short for perspective. And perspective means it has depth. And if you look at this window, it looks like it has depth. It looks like I could go into that and go walk along this thing because it is a perspective view of what it is we're looking at. All right. Now, in terms of this view and all the views in Maya, we can actually navigate or drive around inside of these windows. And we're going to use a couple of different button combinations to do it. So if you take a look at your keyboard, you will see that two keys to the left and right of your space bar is the option key. You guys see that? Okay. With the option key, if you hold that key down and you hold down your left mouse button, you get the tumble function. And tumble allows you to look at an object from any angle or perspective. Tumble, 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 tumble. All right? Option and left mouse button. Whether you're using a mouse or whether you're using one of the buttons on your pen that came with the tablet the school gave you, doesn't make a difference, but either one will do it. And incidentally, while we're on the subject, Maya is definitely an application that needs a 3-button mouse or the pen from your tablet to operate properly. If you try to use the trackpad, you will drive both yourself and me completely nuts. The trackpad is not sufficient for operating Maya. So please either bring your tablet with your pen and utilize that because you can set up your pen to be a 3-button mouse, or get a mouse for $6 and use that. Either one is fine. If you haven't used either one ever, I would say go with the pen because it's a little bit more ergonomically sound for your body and less likely to get like carpal tunnel syndrome. But I learned on a mouse And unless I'm texturing, I really have a hard time getting away from the mouse. So I tend to use this, but it's just bad habits. But anyway, again, Option and left mouse button gives you the ability to tumble. Option and middle mouse button held down gives me the track or dolly function. And this is what allows me to move side to side in Maya. I'm not getting any closer or any further from the object. I'm just sliding alongside it. Middle mouse button and Option held down. All right. Option, I'm sorry, track or dolly. It's almost as if I was on a dolly or a track, if you could imagine. I'm not getting nearer or further from the object, but scooting alongside it. And then the Option key held down and the right mouse button gives you the zoom in, zoom out. So when I'm navigating within a scene in Maya, I can tumble, I can zoom, I can track, I can dolly, and you will be sort of jockeying between these button combinations so fast, you won't even think about it. Actually, what's really funny is when you start using another application that's not 3D and you try to navigate within it. Why doesn't this have depth? But for right now, you'll be good to go. But again, using those buttons is how you navigate the windows. Yes? Yep, middle mouse button held down. Middle mouse button held down. Now it's true, if your middle mouse button has a wheel on it, you can roll the wheel with your finger and that will zoom you in and zoom you out. But what you will notice with that is when you're rolling it, you're really working the tendons across the top of your forearm a lot. And that is definitely the express train to carpal tunnel syndrome. So don't do that. Use the right mouse button in combination with the Option key for zooming in and out. Way easier on the body. And if you think it's not bad, trust me, when you're doing things thousands and thousands of times, that's where you start getting into issues. All righty. Any other questions on navigation within the perspective window? Yes. Right mouse button with the Option key, they all work off Option. Right mouse button is zoom in and out. So if you need to get closer to something or further away, Option and right mouse button. All right, and you can, honestly, you can build sort of a shorthand for this stuff. You know, you might do RMB for right mouse button, MMB for middle mouse button, that kind of thing. It'll help you write that stuff down faster. And when you're talking about menus, you may do, you know, File, Set, Project, and that's kind of a shortcut to give you the path to where you're going. So you'll kind of develop a shorthand that works for you as you go, but that's always a good idea to write as much information down as you can. And for me, honestly, I draw the interface if I have to, because if I don't understand something, I'm very visual, so I will look for the pictures that I drew. Does that make sense? Because that's how I learn. So you got to figure out what works for you. But right. You should be busy. All right? Does that make sense? Navigation? Okay. Now, the cool thing is that's not the only window we have to work with. This area here is called Maya's saved layouts. And there's different layouts for us to work with. This is the perspective window, and that's this layout right here. We also have this layout, which we call 4-view. And the 4-view layout is basically 4 views of exactly the same thing. I've got the perspective view, the top view, the front view, and the side view. And we're all looking at the exact same thing. So for example, if I make a cylinder in Maya, you can see that I see the cylinder here. This is the top view of the cylinder. That's the front view of the cylinder. That's the side view of the cylinder. And I know it's the same cylinder because when I move it around, you can see it wiggles in all the views. Now you might be wondering, well, why do I have 4 views of the same thing? That seems a little bit ridiculous. Well, what we're doing here is we are using these other windows for precision. We use our perspective window to kind of give us an idea of the overall, but we use our orthographic views, and that's what those other ones are called, orthographic views. They help us line things up. Because, for example, if I wanted to put a sphere right on top of my cylinder, if I'm in my perspective view, I can or a cube. If I want to take this cube and try to land it right on top of my cylinder, it's kind of tricky to do. But if I'm in one of my 4-view windows, I can actually line it up quite well. And I know if it looks good here and it looks good here, I got it lined up properly there. Does that make sense? These windows are kind of like binocular vision. By having more than one perspective, we have a higher chance of accuracy. That's perspective, and that's 4-view. Does that make sense? Now, what's even cooler is there's a shortcut to get from window to window, and that's the space bar. Space bar is your buddy. If you hover your cursor over any window and hit the space bar, you're now in that window. If you hit the space bar again, you come back out to 4-view, and you can go to a different window and hit space bar. Now you're in that view. And just like it's easier to work on a bigger piece of paper, it's easier to work with a bigger canvas. Does that make sense? Bigger workspace, more surface area. Make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, so again, that's what these different views allow us for. And there's some other fun views in there as well. We'll get into those as we go, but different windows do different things. All right, now you're probably really excited to see, well, what's this thing with the arrows? What's going on there? This area here of Maya's interface is called the toolbox. The toolbox is basically your hands. It's how you interact with the art you're trying to create. And there's different ways of manipulating it, and we use these tools. Now, the first icon we're going to learn is the select tool, and it's right up there on top. And it's for selecting, because sometimes you just want to select something. I'm not necessarily doing anything with it. I just want to select it. So in terms of using the select tool, you just click on it with the left mouse button. And then if you select something, it lights up in green. That means it's been selected. Something interesting that you'll notice is when nothing is selected, you'll notice that this area here is empty. But when I select an object, it'll tell me what that object is called, where it is in space. It'll give me some inputs that explain its creation in terms of how it's built. Does that make sense? This area over here is referred to as the channel box. The channel box is where information is housed about the selected object. If nothing is selected, there's nothing over there. Does that make sense? Okay. When you select something, channel box populates. Okay. Now, the next tool we're going to talk about is this guy right here, and this is called the Move tool. What do you think the Move tool does? It moves stuff, right? Move it, move it. So in terms of the Move tool, if I want to move an object, I've got these different axes to move it on. And incidentally, in terms of these icons, if you look at your keyboard, you see you got plus and minus. You can make these icons bigger or smaller per your preference, plus or minus. And what you'll notice is I've got these color-coded arrows, and this one's actually yellow because it's selected. If I select this one, then that one becomes yellow. But the colors we're working with are blue, red, and this one will be green, and these are axes of movement. Green stands for Y, the Y-axis. Y-axis is up and down, right? So if I want to move this object up, I'm on the Y-axis. If I want to move it down, it's also on the Y-axis. So if I want that cube to move upward, I can grab the green arrow with my left mouse button and just drag it upward. If I want it to go down, I do the same thing. And what's interesting is if I select that green arrow and I move my mouse from side to side, it won't go side to side. It's really only going to go up or down because that's the axis I have selected. Make sense? Okay. Now the blue axis is the Z-axis or depth axis. And what happens is when I grab that arrow, I move on the X-axis, right? And that's basically front to back, right? And again, I can move the mouse up and down, but it's really just going to go front and back. Something interesting to note, look over here. Do you see this translate Z in the channel box? All right, watch what happens when I move the box in Z. Is that number changing? Yeah. Because it's moving in Z, right? Negatively in this direction, because that's where the arrow is not, or positively in this direction, because that's where the arrow is. Does that make sense? Positive and negative. Because basically Maya is a giant Cartesian grid coordinate system. So positive values on one side, negative values on the other. And these big thick lines decide whether you're in the positive or the negative, and the arrow helps you understand that. The arrow always points to the positive side. So back here, negative. Over here, positive. This is positive y, that's negative y. Positive x, which is side to side, negative x. Make sense? Red always stands for x. Now you might be wondering, well, can I plug in numbers here? Absolutely. I could, if I wanted to, change all of these values to 0. Where do you think it's going to go? Right in the middle, the origin, right? Oops, hang on, my cylinder's in the way. All zeros is the origin, right in the middle. Make sense? Okay. So in terms of moving this cube, you might think, well, okay, so I got to grab the arrows to move it. That's kind of slow and yucky. I don't think I like that. And I could plug in values like 2, and guess where I want it, but that's awkward and clunky. So how do I move things easily? Well, if you grab in the middle, hold down your left mouse button, you can move an object very easily, right? I can whip this thing all over the place. But watch what's happening in the channel box when I grab in the middle. Do you see how all the values are changing? So what you can see is Maya's kind of guessing some of this information because it's not really sure, because I'm looking at a 2D screen, but it represents 3D space. So without a pressure component, depth is difficult to determine. So what we'll do is grab it in the middle, bring it ballpark where we need it, and then we will use the arrows for precision in terms of perfection to place it. Does that make sense? One's the broad stroke, the other gets you right where you want to be. All right? And again, all zeros brings you back to the origin where you started. This is called the rotate tool. What do you think that does? It rotates stuff, right? I'm not trying to trick you. You'll know when I'm trying to trick you. I start laughing. So in terms of the object, if I want to rotate it, I use the rotate tool, right? Green stands for what axis? Y. It's always Y. So if I want this cube to rotate this way, I'm talking about the Y axis. So if I want that cube to rotate, I can grab the green circle and rotate it. And look what happens here. My rotate Y value changes. Those numbers there coordinate to degrees, right? 45 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees. So you could actually plug in, you might say, I want this thing to rotate 45 degrees. Boom, did it. Make sense? Okay. Blue is the Z axis, so I can rotate on Z specifically. I can rotate on X specifically. Any axis I want to rotate the object. All right. The light blue outer circle is all axes at once, willy-nilly. Kind of like grabbing the move tool in the middle. Kind of difficult to control. All right. And again, all zeros brings me back to where I started. All right. Next one down is my scale tool. Scale tool is how I make things bigger or smaller. And again, I've got X, Y, and Z. So if I want to make this object bigger in the Y-axis, I grab the green cube. And you'll notice that when I manipulate the green cube, the object gets taller both in positive and negative Z. All right. If I grab the red axis, that's X, and you'll notice it gets bigger in both positive and negative X. I can do the same thing in Z. And you'll notice I've got X, Y, and Z in my channel box. Right? The only difference is with scale, everything starts at 1/1 scale actual size. So if I wanted this cube to be 3 times bigger than it is right now, I could highlight all 3 of these fields and type in a 3. Now it's 3 times bigger. Does that make sense? Okay. We already talked about this area. These are my saved layouts. Now down in this area here, what we're talking about is animation related controls, which unfortunately we won't get into in this class. I'd like to. But basically this section here is your frames. You guys are familiar with flip books, right? Flip books are a series of pictures, drawing on each different page. Well, what's happening is each stop on this timeline is a single frame or one drawing in a flip book. So if I've got 24 pictures, I can make 1 second of animation. Does that make sense? That's what that thing is, timeline. And this is just setting up how much can I see, how long is it, that kind of stuff. We talked about the helpline already, explaining how things work. These are the controls for my animation. Play my animation forward, stop, play my animation backwards, stop, go 1 keyframe back, go 1 keyframe forward, go 1 frame back, 1 frame forward, go to the beginning, go to the end. Basically works like a DVD player, right? Just jump around. Now this area here is called Maya's layer editor. Now if you've worked with Photoshop at all, how many of you guys have worked with Photoshop? Okay, good, good. In terms of Photoshop, the power of Photoshop is the layers. Well, Maya has layers too. They're not quite as cool and powerful as Photoshop's, but they do work on a similar capacity, particularly when it comes to organization. We can lock layers and template layers and hide things and show things, and that's what that area does in Maya as well. But Photoshop definitely way cooler in terms of the layers. But it does help out a lot to organize things by creating layers. Right? Then we can put objects on layers, and then we can hide them. And then we can hide them and show them, like clicking the little eyeball. Same kind of thing. All right. Now, that's a quick overview of Maya's interface and what's going on over there. Are there any preliminary questions about the stuff we talked about? No? Okay. Again, it's pretty straightforward, and we're going to go into more detail, obviously, in each section as we need it. It would be impossible to talk about the whole thing at once.
How do you put things into the layer file?
Oh, we're going to talk about that, but just because you asked, I'll show you. If I want to create a layer, all I do is go to Layers, click with the left mouse button and choose Create Empty Layer, and that will make a new layer for me. And if I double click on that layer, I can name it, and I'm going to call it I'll call it Bob layer. And hit save. So now I've got this layer called Bob. And as long as that layer is selected, and you see when they're blue, they're selected, I can select an object, and then over that layer, hold down the right mouse button and choose Add Selected Object. So when that object has been added, if I click the little V at the end for visibility, it hides and shows. And that is a working functional layer. Make sense? Okay. So if it's not named or it doesn't work, that's not a functional layer. Make sense? You think you might get graded on that? For shizzle. So make sure you take note of that. All right. You guys ready to play with Maya a little bit? Okay, again, for those of you who have Maya, we're going to have a little fun with Maya. If you don't have Maya, don't panic. Like I said, we can make sure you get Maya set up when you're in the lab, but this is your opportunity to play a little bit, and you can already see the advantage of being able to actually touch and move things, because that's how you're going to learn. So what we're going to do is a fun little activity. Which is the navigation and manipulation. All right. Now, what I want you to do, I'm going to let that hide down. Oh, important note right here. Undo. The undo key is probably the coolest key in Maya. That's the Z key. Anytime you do something you didn't like, just hit Z and it will undo it. And I think Maya by default has like 50 undos, but you can set it for infinite if you want. I don't recommend that, but you could. But basically what that allows you to do is sort of go backwards in time and change mistakes you made. Like the time I sold my skateboard so I could go out on a date with a girl. Yes, I really missed that skateboard. That girl was not worth it. It was a great skateboard. All right, so let's not walk through my past. Let's go into working on Maya. So here we go. Here we are in Maya, and I do have a file that you can work from. So if you did download your activity file folder, we're about to do an activity. What we would do is set our project to the activity file folder, file, set project, and we would navigate to where our activity file folder is, select the outer folder and hit set, and then we would go to file, open scene. Very important for you to realize, setting your project and opening a file are two totally different, unrelated things. Does that make sense? They do follow each other, but setting your project does not open files, and opening files does not set your project. So first I tell Maya what I want to work on, then I can open a file. So I go to File, Set Project, I choose my activity file folder, set, and then I go to File, Open Scene, and I choose the file folder I want. Now, I have an exercise in here for you guys to play with. It's the toolbox activity, and don't save. And nope, that one's completed already. But when you open the file, you will see I have some objects in here already, and they're nice and colored up. But I put them on a layer and made it so you can't play with them. But that's because they're supposed to be a reference. And what you're going to do is actually recreate what you see over here. So for example, if you look down here at the bottom, this is the torus. And if you come up here to your polygon modeling, you'll see you have a bunch of objects up here. One of them, the polygon primitive, the torus, is right here. So if you click on it, it will make a little donut for you. Whee! And then if you use your orthographic views, you can use your move tool and bring that torus up so it is resting firmly on the ground, that thick black line. Next thing we have is a cylinder. So I can click the cylinder icon and that'll make one of those. And again, I'm going to go to my orthographic views to line them up. Next, I need a sphere, so I can create one of those. Again, line it up. Looks good here. Looks good in the front view as well. Then it must be good out here. Cube. And then this guy here is the pyramid. And I don't think this, yeah, it's the cone. I don't know where the pyramid is. Usually it's on there. Let me see if I stretch this out, it'll show up. No, I don't see it in here. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go to my create menu and go to my polygon primitives. And then you'll see that there's a pyramid in there. And when you create it, you'll see it's upside down. So I would have to use my rotate tool to flip it over 180 degrees. And then I would be able to move it down. Now, if you don't have your activity file folder at hand because you didn't download it yet, again, not a huge deal today, just make some polygon primitives, click on them, and what I want you to do is try to stack them on top of each other. You don't have to build exactly the thing that I've chosen for you to build, just as long as you can create some polygon primitives and place them within the scene and line them up a little bit, that's totally fine. Something I do want to show you is you've probably noticed that when I'm making my objects, when I click on them, they just appear and they're ready to go. And that's a preference thing. I set it for that. If you take a look, if you go to your create menu and go to your polygon primitives, down here towards the bottom, you'll see interactive creation, and you'll see that on mine, it's unchecked. And when it's unchecked, that's when you click on a shape, it just makes it instantly for you. You don't have to worry about it. If I turn this on by checking it with the left mouse button, and you see I'll go back and you can see it's checked on now. If I say, oh, I want a cylinder, if I click on cylinder, it'll say, okay, draw the cylinder you want. Okay, so I'm going to drag with my left mouse button, and that will make the base. And then I let go, and it'll say, okay, now drag upwards for how tall you want it to be. So then I click again with my left mouse button, and I draw, and I let go. I don't particularly like interactive creation because I almost never draw exactly the shape I want anyway, and I have to change the shape of it anyway. So what I typically do is I uncheck that, create polygon primitives, and just uncheck with the left mouse button. And then now that that's off, if I click on anything, I just get an object. And I'm going to change the shape of it anyway. So that's just a personal preference of mine. You can do it any way you wish. But what I'd just like to see is that you have the ability to create some polygon primitives and use the move tool and the rotate tool and the scale tool to kind of change the shapes and move stuff around. Ah, good for you guys. Ooh, it's Saturn. Okay, first you have to set your project. So go to File, Set Project. Yep, and you're going to choose the activity file folder, wherever you put it. One click on just the outer folder. Set. Now go to File, Open Scene. Now you'll see toolbox activity, right? Like I said, it seems so simple, but if you're missing one step, it does not work. And that's why I always say write stuff down, because there's always one little step. And it's frustrating as all get out when it's not working. Yes. Yes, I can see that. Oh, yes. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff you got to download, but it's probably all in your downloads folder. Does that make sense? Because that's where by default your computer downloads to.
I just duplicated the thing because I already know.
No, good. Good for you. But yeah, you got to download the folder you need. But like I said, if you have Maya up and working, just create some shapes and move stuff around. As long as you can do something, I can tell that you're understanding what it is we're doing. Does that make sense? Okay.
Can you just explain how you like separate each block from each other?
Well, I didn't mess with this at all because I made that bulletproof so you can't play with it. I made new stuff. So you want to click on your polygon tab. The tab that says polygon.
Second one.
Yep, right there. And then create new shapes from there. Got it? Yay, see? Now use your tools in your toolbox to move that thing around. Yes, I know, it's gonna be frustrating without a mouse. But if the one lesson you walk away from, actually, let me announce this to everybody. Hey guys, real quick, if the one thing you walk away from this class today from, if you walk out of here and you go, you know what, I need to write stuff down because there's a lot of stuff. Because let me tell you, I didn't tell you anything really today. That was a thimble full of information. Every class after this one is going to make this one look like a cakewalk. Does that make sense? So if you have any questions right now, beyond, just the rudimentary things we just talked about, your approach to this class is not working. You need to change that. And if that means taking notes, asking more questions, then please do that. Does that make sense? That's an important takeaway from today. Because if I'm already kicking your butt, you're in trouble. Right? Number 2, you need a mouse or your pen, right? Maya works very, very slow and awkwardly without a pen or a mouse. So again, if you walk out of this class today going, I better have a mouse on Wednesday, that is also a win. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Okay, good. So again, the tools are there. Just make sure you're using them. All right, I'm going to continue to walk around and see how you guys are doing and keep helping people. But I just wanted to put that out there. This is a microcosm of what we're going to have on a daily basis. So be prepared. Brian will be over here in just one second.
last month. I downloaded the Maya 2017 version. Is that?
Well, we're working with 2018, but you can download 2018. Yep, we gave you a link, so just make sure you use the link that we gave you.
Okay, yeah, because I never actually activated the 2017.
Okay. Yeah, it'll probably work off the same serial number, in fact.
Yeah, I have a question about that too. So I was here a couple of years ago, and I have 2017 now. My question is that if I have it ready, if I go back download 2018, will I still be able to download 2018 on my home computer?
I think you're allowed to have it on 2 machines at least.
Would this count as my second machine since it'd be technically 2 programs? Because that would make there be 2 Mayas on the computer, right?
You know, I'm not really certain.
Because it's not like an update.
No, I know what you're saying, and I'm not really certain how that would work, but all I can say is you got to try it because A, you need to have 2018, and you have to have 2018 in this classroom with me. So all you can do is give it a shot. Hopefully it will allow you to do it in both. Does that make sense? Yeah, but do tell me how it pans out because I want to be able to tell other people if there's a problem with that. What's that? I wouldn't count on it. Probably. I doubt highly they would know that for sure. They're more, hey, there's something wrong with my laptop. What's wrong? You know, this application isn't loading. Yes.
Yeah, I want to use my pen, but whenever I like just hover, I would move it around as if I'm like holding.
Right. Well, that's the pressure sensitivity. You would have to make an adjustment to that.
All right.
Yeah, and like I said, when you guys get to the lab, you have a little bit more hands-on, one-on-one kind of help. So if you ask Marcus, he can show you how to adjust the pressure sensitivity of the pen. So it's going to be a little frustrating right now, but luckily we're not going to use it too much. Does that make sense? Okay, because it's all about the sensitivity of the pen to the tablet.
Then how do I
You have to set up your pen to be a 3-button mouse, and each of those buttons in conjunction with the option key will allow you to navigate. Does that make sense? So like the button on top will be middle mouse button. The button on the right will be right mouse button. Does that make sense? So you just got to set it up so that it will mimic basically what a mouse does. But the pen is better for you, I think.
Yeah, I want to use a pen, but I just think
Yeah.
the pressure sensitivity.
Yep. No worries. Like I said, that's not a big issue. As long as you're fully functional by Wednesday, you're fine. You know what? Time always flies when you're having fun. It's the worst. All righty. So it looks like you guys overall are doing pretty well. Like I said, you're going to get better with practice, but that's the good news. You know, it doesn't take magical powers to get good at this at all. It doesn't matter how smart you are either. What you need to do is practice. It's just like hitting a baseball, skateboarding, windsurfing, wakeboarding, anything you've ever done in your life. Play the guitar. If you learned how to do something, you can learn how to do this because it's going to take the same thing. Practice, right? Any game you've ever beaten, right? Do you quit after playing one time?
Yes.
You never quit if it's a good game. No, you never quit after one game. That doesn't happen. You just paid $60 minimum for that thing. You're not going to quit after one game. Point is, you get better by practicing. This is no different. Does that make sense? Magical powers will not make you good at this. Practice will make you good at this. But that's the good news. That means anybody who puts in the time can learn this and can do it. The question is, will you put in the time? That is the only variable, and I have no control over that. I recommend 2 hours every night, above and beyond your assignments. Just 2 hours, work on this stuff. You're going to get good at this really fast. Does that make sense? Hell yeah?
Hell yeah.
Okay, good. All right. Let's take a look at some more material. As I was saying, the production pipeline for our class, we've got 5 phases of modeling. We've got designing and the gathering of reference, the block out phase, building the object in logical parts. Then we get into UV mapping, and then we clean up and organize our file to go on to the next phase of the production pipeline. So I've kind of got it illustrated here in terms of the steps that we're going to be going through for our little modeling pipeline. All right, the first thing we're going to talk about is reference and the importance of. In terms of reference, it's really important to have good reference because the better the quality of the reference you have, the faster and the easier it is to actually build these objects. So it is of the utmost importance you get the best reference you possibly can. Yes. Absolutely, absolutely, and I can always do that. Oh, one more? Okay, that's fine. That one? Okay, cool. And again, I have no problem with that whatsoever. No problem whatsoever. You want to see a slide again? You got it.
You can't download them on FSO.
Yep, and these slides are posted on FSO, absolutely. Yes, they are. Now, does that mean don't take notes? Definitely not. What that means is those slides are there to help you. They do not replace note-taking, not by any stretch. These are kind of more bullet points for me. I talk about way more than these slides actually show. All right, now, in terms of your reference, what I'd like you guys to start getting in the habit of is take a look at the objects that we're building and try to see the simple primitive shapes inside them. Because as I said earlier, modeling is a lot like illustration. The same steps that you take in terms of drawing are the steps that you take with modeling. They have very similar ideologies. So what I want you to do is start looking at objects and try to see what simple shapes and volumes are inside these objects. Because ultimately, no matter what you're trying to build, whether it's organic or inorganic, everything can be broken down into primitive shapes. And that's what we start with when we're creating objects, volumes. Except when we're working in Maya, we're using polygon primitives. That's the only difference. So instead of drawing a cylinder, we just hit the cylinder button. Does that make sense? If I was going to draw a telephone pole, I would start by drawing a cylinder, right? Because that occupies most of the shape and form that I need for a cylinder. Well, if I'm going to be modeling a telephone pole, the same thing happens, except instead of drawing the cylinder, I just press the cylinder button and one is made for me. Then I just have to shape it. Does that make sense? Hell yeah? Awesome. All right, so who can tell me what this is? It is a silhouette. Yes.
Star space.
That's right, that's my car right there. What's that? A cat. What's that? Dog. It says, every month somebody says dog, except last month nobody said dog. But yeah, cat. What we're looking at is silhouette. And the idea here, or what's so important about silhouette, is we can actually identify objects just from their silhouette. And that's because silhouette is tremendously important in terms of identifying an object for what it is. And as a modeler, job one is hit silhouette. If I'm modeling something, you should be able to look at just the shadowy outline of it and tell me immediately what it is. Then I know I did a good job of modeling that object. Does that make sense? Recognition. So as a result, or actually, what's crazy about silhouette is you can actually tell different breeds of dog, different kinds of trees, and that's just from the silhouette. There's no surface detail there whatsoever, but just from the silhouette, you can pick out the different things. That's how strong silhouette is and how important it is to the identification of the object. As a result, this is something we grade on. This is a big piece of, does it look right? Does that make sense? 35% of your grade. So if this is your reference, this lamp, these two lamps are close enough in appearance to the reference image that it would score all the points associated with silhouette. Does that make sense? These lamps here are too different. They don't look enough like that, so they don't get the silhouette points. Make sense? Okay, so silhouette is a yes-no thing. Either it's close enough or it's not. Any questions on silhouette? Okay. Form. Form is the other side of silhouette. Form is 3D depth-related surface detail. So this is an added level of detail. It also helps us identify an object for what it is. It works in conjunction with silhouette. So in terms of form, this is also important in terms of grading, does it look right? So when I look at an object, I should be able to recognize it by its surface detail as well. So for example, if you take a look, here's my reference image. These two lamps are close enough to that lamp that they're going to earn the form-related points. These lamps are too different. They're not closely enough matched. Therefore, they don't get the form points. It is possible to hit silhouette points, but miss form points. Does that make sense? I can recognize it from its shadow, but when I look at its surface detail, it might not be close enough. Both of these components together yield, does it look right? Does that make sense? Okay, so these are the form-related points that you would score on an object. All right, let's take a look at today's skill check. We have a skill check that is designed to encompass pretty much what we talked about today. Mostly, it is an exercise in utilizing Maya's interface. It also helps you to navigate within Maya, and it helps you with jumping around from window to window. Helps you to use the channel box. So there's a lot of how do I actually use Maya that goes into this particular skill check. And again, it's worth an added 1% of your grade. So definitely well worth it to do. And this is our Build Me assignment, affectionately called Captain Idaho. Now, when you download your skill check folder from FSO, you'll be able to work on this assignment. Now, in terms of getting to this assignment, it works just like the activity file folders. So the first thing I have to do is set my project. I have to let Maya know, hey, I'm not working on activity files anymore. I want to work on my skill check. So what I'll do is I'll go to File, Set Project, because I'm changing gears. This time, I'm going to select my skill check file folder. Again, I'm not going to go inside. I just want to click the outer folder, skill check, and then hit Set. All right, now I go to File, Open Scene, and you will see right up on the top, because they're alphabetical in here, the file called Build Me. And when you open it up, and there's just a bunch of OKs you have to click. Don't panic if you see any of them. It's not bad. Just Maya's going, oh no, my shoes aren't tied. Maya's freaking out about one thing or another. You just go, okay, 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 okay. So I get to my Maya file, and you see that Captain Idaho is all kinds of blowed up. It does not look right. Now, the good news is he's relatively easy to fix. Let's take a look at, where's my Captain Idaho Build Me? I think I got my reference in here. Oh, here we go. When you download the file from FSO, it's going to look like this. And when you download it, it will be a cute little zipped up file like this, which you double click on, and then it gives you this folder. I don't need this piece anymore, but in the folder, you'll see that we have the Maya file in there, and we have two reference images. So the first reference image is what Captain Idaho looks like in the perspective view, and then the second reference image is actually a 4-view image of what he looks like, so you can compare from any angle. All right, so I need to rebuild this dude and make him look right, because that's our goal, right? So I'll go to Maya. Where are you, Maya? There you are. And let's start with this piece here. If I select it, its name appears in the channel box. This is the potato body. Now, if I look at this, you can see it's kind of narrow on the bottom and big on the top, kind of like a light bulb without the threaded part, right? And if I look at my Captain Idaho reference, let's see, where are you? He's kind of actually smaller on the top and bigger on the bottom. So what's wrong with my potato? I got to flip it, right? Flip it good. So I go over here to rotate, rotate that bad boy 180 degrees. Floop. So now it's this way. Oh, that looks better. Yay. All right, first thing done. Now, let's say I want to put his nose in there, right? I can see, oh, that's his nose there. But let's say there's a ton of pieces in here and I can't tell what his nose is. I have no idea. There's a window in Maya that actually lists everything that's in your scene so you can find it super easy. And it's called the outliner. So if I go to window and I go to outliner, I open that up and you'll see there's a whole bunch of things listed here. And one of them is, lo and behold, the schnoz. So if I select it, there's my nose. So again, I can select it here and it highlights there, or I can select it there and it highlights here. That's the nose. So to get it into place, I'm going to need to use my move tool and move it, right? Dun, 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 dun. So here's my nose. I'm going to line it up a little bit here. When I go into my side view, I can see, oh, wait a minute. That little peg is supposed to go into that little opening there. So that's not going to work. I need to rotate it, spin it around a little bit, and then move it into position. Mark. Right? Feel free to make noises. Maya does not, so you have to make them. So I line up his nose. All right, nose is in place. But if I look at this picture, does that nose look right? What's wrong with it? Too small. So what tool do I need? Scale tool, absolutely. So if I grab his nose, it needs to be bigger. So I switch to my scale tool. If I scale on just the red axis, right? Torpedo nose. That's not it. If I scale in just Y, right? Koala nose. So what I need to do is, I like the shape of the nose because that looks pretty good. I just need to make the whole thing bigger but maintain the proportions. So I'm going to scale from the little light blue cube in the middle. There we go. Does that make sense? So you rebuild Captain Idaho. Every piece you need is in there. You don't have to make anything. No duplicating, nothing crazy. The pieces are there. Just move them around. Translate, rotate, scale. Use the 4 views to line things up, and use your reference image as a guide so you can figure out what it's supposed to look like when it's done. Does that make sense? Yes. Skill check file folder. Yep. And that's one of those many folders that you need to download in the section called downloads. And when it comes to FSO, guys, go over that with a fine-toothed comb. There is a lot of information in there to help you be successful with your assignments and this class in general. There's a lot of material in there. I don't get paid by the word or by the image, so you know if I put it in there, it's important. So make sure you're looking it over because many questions can be answered by just reading what's on FSO. It's like it's intended to be instructional to where you don't even need me, right? That's dangerous. I want you to have the information. Does that make sense? Because you're going to be working on these assignments at who knows what hour of the day or night, and I might not be available to help. So you need information. It's important. When you download from FSO, yep, it's on there. Yep, you'll have reference images. In fact, on the skill check activity, you'll see there's pictures of him on there. That's an excellent question. Does anybody know how we turn in assignments on FSO? Yes, well, there's a whole system for how do you turn stuff in, and that information is on FSO. So literally, if you go to the skill check 1 activity and you open it up, it'll tell you, hey, this is what we're trying to do. Here's your reference images. Here's the file you need to download, and this is how you turn it in. So literally all the information is there so that we don't have to use valuable class time talking about that, because that's pretty straightforward. It's follow directions, right? Brush your teeth, wash your face, comb your hair, grab your books, get out of the house by 7:30. Make sense? So if you can follow instructions, you're going to do fine. Don't skip over those though, because there are points associated with that stuff. So you don't want to miss any of those steps. Now, the one thing I do want to tell you, and I'll come back to your question, is when it's all done and it's time to save it, very important for the saving. Now, let's say my Captain Idaho is all done and I want to save him. If you look up here, you will see that the name of this file is buildme.ma. This is a Maya ASCII file. Maya files come in two varieties, ASCII and binary. It's like chocolate and vanilla. They're both ice cream, it's just which flavor do you want. Binary files are a little bit smaller in size, but it's all ones and zeros. So if there's something that happens to the file, it can become corrupted and not function. My ASCII files, you can actually open as a text document, and it actually reads like C++ if you understand computer programming. So you can actually make adjustments to the file in its text mode, which is kind of cool, actually. But point being, they're just two different ways of saving the same thing. Does that make sense? You can save an image as a JPEG, you can save it as a PNG. Make sense? Although JPEGs are not as good quality as PNGs, but point is, two different flavors of image. So when it comes to saving the file, if the original file is an .ma, when you go to save it, you have to save it as an MA too. It doesn't want you to switch flavors. Does that make sense? So if I want to save this file, I'm going to go to File, Save Scene As, and it's going to say, well, what do you want to save it as? And I'm going to name it right here. And there's actually a very specific naming convention that we're supposed to be using. And you'll learn this, and it is on FSO, but it's going to be gold_Steve. So it's obviously first name, last name. This is my Lecture 1 skill check, last name, first name, _3DF, _ the year and month you took this class, 1804, 2018, 4th month, April. Does that make sense? Again, that's on FSO. So you're going to be able to get that easy peasy. Like I said, follow the instructions for turn in. Now, I've got all the name in there. Then the last thing I have to do is tell Maya, using this drop down, what kind of file to turn it into. By default, it's set for Maya binary, MB, right? But what kind of file is this? MA. So if I leave it at MB and I try to save it, Maya's going to go, oh, I can't do that. I can't save it. File type incompatible. Panic. Danger, Will Robinson, right? So what I have to do is tell Maya, make it an ASCII, please. And all I have to do is click this drop down and choose ASCII from the options. So I just go here and I go click and I choose ASCII, ASCII. And now it's going to save it as an MA, and now everything's going to be fine because I am saving it as the same file type as the original, MA. Does that make sense? Now, if I save a file accidentally as an MB and I just highlight it and write MA over it, that doesn't change the file type. Does that make sense? Just like I can't rip off a name tag from somebody and give them a new name and now they're another person. It doesn't work like that. So you have to actually save it as the file type you're looking for. Does that make sense? And again, this information is on FSO. So if you take a look at how do I turn in my files, that's there. Does that make sense? It is in text. You can't miss it. Do people miss it? Yes. Should they? No. Turn-in procedure is part of your grade. So make sure you're following it. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? Okay. So I saved the tricky stuff for in class. The cakewalk stuff, that's on FSO. All right. Any questions about their skill check, what you need to do? No? Okay. Again, it's pretty straightforward. It does get more complex as we go. And like I said, in terms of the information we cover each day, it gets pretty heavy pretty quick. You know what I mean? So if you struggled today, when you come back on Wednesday, new attitude, right? New approach to learning the material, more focused, more engaged. Any of you guys play baseball or softball? Basketball, okay, that works too, right? If I'm playing basketball and I'm on the court, is anybody likely to throw me the ball? Yeah, maybe. Am I going to catch it? Maybe, right? Maybe. Odds are not good, right? This is passively playing basketball. Am I ready to play basketball now? Oh, hell yeah, I am. Absolutely. Knees bent, right? Lower center of gravity. I'm up on the balls of my feet. I got my weight forward. My hands are out. This is an active pose for an athletic event of any kind. I can do any sport better actively engaged. Does that make sense? I look like I'm participating, right? Education is the same way. It is no different. You can't sit in your chair and just let information wash over you and, well, some of it sticks and some of it doesn't. That is passive learning. Passive learning is not sufficient to be successful. Does that make sense? It can't just wash over you, right? If you want to learn, you've got to engage the material. You got to go after this material. Because if you understand this material to the best of your ability, all that gives you is a chance to make it in this field. That's it. And that's the critical part, a chance. The world of, I go to school, I get my paper, and Pixar's waiting for me in the parking lot because they can't wait for me to get out. That is a fantasy. That does not exist. This line of work, you are in for the fight of your life. You have to win this job. You have to take this job from someone else. Does that make sense? You cannot actively, or you cannot passively sit here and just let the information flow over you. That's not going to cut it. It just won't. And again, I'm a red pill guy, so I'm going to tell you what it is I know, what I've seen, and what I've experienced so that you have a better chance at being successful. I don't sugarcoat stuff. I'm not trying to scare you, but I will tell you what I've seen and what I know. Does that make sense? Because I think if you know how things really are, you're going to make better choices because you know. Does that make sense? Okay. Because I don't want you guys walking into this stuff with your eyes closed, right? Ready. That's what you need to do every day, A game. All right. Any questions? Yes. The actual image is on FSO. Yeah, if you sign on to the activity itself, and the skill lecture one skill check has its own page on FSO, and literally there's pictures in there that show you exactly what you're going for, and you can use that picture too if you want. Drag it right off of FSO onto your desktop, and you got it. Well, something you have to be aware of is number one, Maya is a huge application. It's like several gigs in size, so it will take a long time to download. In terms of installation, it shouldn't be that long, but something that you, again, you have to bear in mind is you might have to restart your computer because oftentimes, and actually that's a good thing to talk about while we're here talking about that. Are you guys at your best when you don't sleep? If you didn't sleep for several days, would you be good mood, happy, fully functional, and able to do everything perfectly? No, and your laptop is no different. We need to shut those things down, right? At night, literally turn it off, not close the top, but shut it down. Just like if you don't sleep ever, you get crazy, your laptop gets crazy if you don't let it sleep either, because it's saving all this memory. We got everything on the RAM, we got everything rolling around inside there, and it's thinking. And if you never let it sleep, it will go nuts on you. I promise you. It'll make Skynet look like a party. So do yourself and your laptop a favor, and at night, shut it off, let it sleep. At the very least, when you get here in the beginning of your day, restart it. Just let it take a breath and clear everything, and it'll work so much better. I can't tell you how much more effective your machine is when you actually let it rest a little bit, just like you. So you might just need to restart it and then try that again, because it does get edgy. Good question though, and thank you for asking, because I wanted to talk about that. Because I know you're like, oh, I'm gonna restart my computer. It takes forever for it to start, and oh, launching Maya, drag. I know, but trust me, everything works better when you just shut it off when you're done, and then launch it back up when it's time to go. No, the activities that we do in class are just for you. It's like going to the batting cage to get better at hitting. You know what I mean? It's practice so that you can do better in the game. Does that make sense? You don't have to save it. In fact, I would recommend you don't, because what happens is if you feel like, shoot, I didn't do so great at that activity we did today, the one where we were creating the shapes and putting them on top of each other, it felt really awkward and I didn't really like how that went. Well, guess what you should be doing in lab? Open up that activity, unsaved, so it's right at the start, and you can do it again and again and again and again. And you don't get like, oh, it's so precious, the donut. You don't care. It's an exercise file. So it's just an opportunity to practice and something you're not emotionally attached to. So you can feel free to screw it up or not save it or mess with it in any way you want. And that's what it's for. And the more you practice, the better you will get. And there's absolutely a structure and a science behind the stuff that we've created for you guys so that you can be more successful. Definitely. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. Again, that's what those activities are for. Use them again and again. Use them in the lab. Have a lab instructor sit down right next to you and go, hey, I tried to do this today. It was terrible. I had the hardest time. That's when we can work on it in the lab. Make sense? Hell yeah? Awesome. So good. Again, that's all I needed to talk about today. It's a little bit over 3. I got to let you guys go. But don't worry, you won't be late to lab. The lab guys know that if you are ever late to class, it's my fault, but that's okay. The important thing is you get the information you need, because there, it's all execution. All righty? And incidentally, those guys can do demonstrations too. If you guys feel like as a class, you're like, can we talk about the interface again? They'll do it for you. They can do demonstrations on the screen also. They are teachers. They are just as qualified to teach this class as I am. They just happen to be in the lab. Does that make sense? Very bright, very talented people. So please take advantage of them and make sure you're squeezing every bit of information out of them you can. All right, I'll see you guys on Wednesday. Thank you very much. And we'll do this again and learn some more fun stuff and get to where we can model stuff. Yay, modeling.